Now I want to establish some brighter white areas and pop some of these areas up. And I am going to go ahead and go back and use my rake brush for this. I could use my Fandango too, but that was more just so that I could get some of those areas quicker. I want the beard to pop forward in the middle here, so I'm thinning the paint titanium white with half paint, half water, and I'm just going to catch the center area here, kind of taper that color so that it kind of disappears. A little bit thicker in the center area, but really taper it off skinny above and below that. And don't fill in solid. If I lose all my darks, I'll have to go back and redo them. All right, and then I'm going to skip. Every time I do this, it might be a little bit different. I want to skip a little layer or a little area, and then I want to add another highlight. Skip another area, and then kind of like juggle them up and down so that they're not all exactly the same. Light touch, remember, you want skinny lines now, and I'm hitting the center areas. If I get too carried away, I can always come back and shade some more. Let's keep going up here. There again, hitting the center areas so that they'll pop forward a little bit. Not filling anything in solid. Let's get the curls at the bottom. There again, in the center. And I do like to accent the tips just a little bit as well. A little bit more water into my paint. And see, I kind of flip my brush in different directions. I pull from the tips in or from the top down. And I want to get up above the eyeglasses there a little bit. There again, don't lose all of your shadows. Now let me get zoomed back in again for the sides of the hair. You get a little bit more refined hairs this time. And I could still come back with my liner brush if I need to, just like I did on the mustache, and get some flyaway hairs. Okay, now I want to attach some hair up against the sides of the face so that instead of just having a sharp stopping point, I'm going to actually overlap. Now I'm coming down and then into the hair so that it kind of attaches. So kind of down on top of the skin, and then pull it in. And just gentle. You don't want to fill this in solid. You still would be nice to see a little bit of that skin color peeking through those lines. In the cheek, I want definite tips going into the skin where the whiskers are growing out of the cheek area. And sometimes I go back and put a second coat on. You can't rush this. You have to allow it to just kind of take time to dry in between layers. Okay, now on the other side of the face, in fact, let me tip it sideways so I can reach it easier. Same thing, I'm coming down and then into the hair so that I've got the hair overlapping slightly into the skin, and it softens the edge of the face. And then when I get down a little further into the cheek area, that's where I want to have actually the tips coming out of the skin as opposed to a softed round edge. Not filling anything in, solid, solid. I'm going to work on the fur on the top of the hat next, and I'm going to go back to using my wave brush, and I got to start by camouflaging where the fur comes into the forehead. So I'm going to thin some black with just water, and I'm going to pull some little hairs into the top of the forehead in the direction that the fur is going to be going, so that I don't have quite such a sharp forehead. Get that camouflaged. And you may even want to do that up into the red area of the hat. Take a look at your photograph or your pattern and look at the direction that the fur lines are coming into the hat, and you want to pull those black lines in those directions. Okay, then I'm going to start with medium white, and I'm going to thin that with water and continue using my wave brush to get the fur started. And I really want to pay attention to the direction on the pattern or in the photo. I like to start on the outside edge. Now get up on those little tips, and I want you to kind of almost think of clusters and pull out along the edge. And then I'm going to, so what I've done is I've kind of created a row here. Okay, but I want them to be a little bit more irregular on the outside edges. Okay, then I'm going to go back in a step and I'm going to create another row. I need to come over into the forehead, and I can leave just a slight little separation at this stage, and then up into the red of the hat. Come back and create another row. So really pay attention to the direction that you're pulling those hairs. I don't need quite such a separation there. And then another row. And if I hold my brush a little more at an angle, I'll get a little bit more irregular edges where I leave off. So for instance, if I'm just pulling straight, I'm going to just get straight stopping points. If I take the brush and I angle it just a little bit and I pull, I'll get one side that's going to have longer tips than the other. So that'll make it look a little bit more natural. You do want to go up into the hat and down into the forehead. Okay, and you're going to keep going until you get to somewhere here on the outside edge, about right there, and then I'm going to switch direction. Because then I want to kind of pivot around in a circle. So when I get to that center area, I'm actually going to go to the outside edge of the hat and make rows. Go right off the edge of your canvas. We'll camouflage that in there. Make sure you come down into the forehead. Just a light touch. All this does is establish the direction of the fur. And you could still change it with the next steps if you didn't get it right. So think more of base coating. And these are a little bit thicker lines at this stage. All right. Now I want to go through and I want to get some shadows in there. And so I'm going to go to my large angle brush, my 1/2 inch angle brush, and I'm going to do a corner load, and I'm just going to use water in the brush. Corner load of burnt umber. And what I want to do is I want to shade the roots of the fur. So these are the tips. The opposite end is the root, where it would be going into the skin of the animal. And I'm going to chop that in. I'm on the chisel edge of my angle, and I'm chopping that in, shading the roots. So each row, I want to chop in where the root is. Get that shaded down in. Just use water in the brush. There's all different colors that you could use to shade. Sometimes I've used Payne's Gray. Sometimes I've used a little bit more of a purpley color. You have lots of choices. And then I've got to find, remember you got to find where the root is of each row. And just kind of chop it in the center here a little bit. Get the root. Just using the chisel edge. It just kind of helps separate the rows. Now it looks pretty rough at this stage. The next couple stages will help to refine it a little bit more. And we'll be doing the same thing after on the fur down where the hand is. Okay, now I'm going to go back and I want to use titanium white, and I want to just keep working. I'm not going to let any of this dry. I want to use my rake brush now. Thin down the titanium white with water, about 1/2 and 1/2, just like you would for liner brush work. Now what I want to do is I want to get the tips of the hair of each of the rows. So I'm going to turn this so that I can get a better angle for pulling. I'm going to pull from the tips. There again, if you kind of curve it different directions, it'll actually look a little bit more natural rather than everything so lined up. This time I do want to kind of slightly overlap into the row instead of leaving a space. So I overlap into the previous row and it kind of connects them a little better. Keep thinning my paint. Kind of twist the brush, different angles. If I get too carried away, I can always come back, put some more shadow in the root area again. And I may have to come back and do another coat. Just kind of a wait and see game. And kind of think clusters as you're putting this on so that it's not quite so even. No pressure, and don't push down. You want to have those fine little tips. Get some in the center there so you kind of camouflage where you left off. That's going to be a little bit lighter area anyway. Keep thinning my paint a little bit with water. Make sure I overlap the row that it's in front of. Okay, now I want to take a look, and I want to actually get this area in here a little bit lighter. So I'm going to actually add a little more now into that area because I want that to pop forward. That had more light coming in. So strengthen those highlights on the tips. A little bit more there. And keep kind of standing back away from your piece every so often and taking a look at it from a distance. A lot of times it's really hard to see how much more you need until you get back away from it. I want it to stay darker on the right side. I just want this left side to be a little bit brighter. So that's going to get a little extra highlights here and there. But I still want to have some shadow showing, just not as much. If I get too much covered up, it's just going to look flat. Now I can also let this dry, and I can put a little bit more shadow on this opposite side, but I do have to let it dry first before I can do that. So the right side of the fur will get darker. Make sure you overlap into the skin. And the other thing that you want to look at is to see if you've gotten it, the thickness going across about the same. A lot of times what happens when you're working on this circle, that area gets real big and then the other end is real skinny, so you might have to come back and add just a few more to the top of your fur so that you have the same width all the way across. Okay, while that's drying, I'm going to actually get a little bit of titanium white liner brush lines in the hairs on each side of the face. So I want to get just some individual, not too many, but these will be a different width and thickness from what the rake brush was, and that's going to help set in that hair next to the face, and even in the cheek there, get a little bit more of the liner brush lines, and even in the tips, get a few little stray flyaways, and that's going to help accent the tips because a lot of times what happens is they just kind of seem to blend in or melt in after you get that first white on there, and just a few little hairs, little flyaways really help make a difference. So, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. In fact, let's turn it so I can get a better angle next to the face so that it's kind of overlapping on top of that face a little better. And then come back and get a few from the tips. And it doesn't have to be a lot. But it does help kind of that finishing touch. Get it attached into the skin a little better. It just helps to break some of those areas up. Now if I pull down into the beard, I'm usually doing at least 3 lines that are close to each other instead of just one all by itself. Okay, and let's take a look at the mustache one more time. Let's get just a few little thicker lines in the mustache as well. If you get too thick at the bottom where the tips are, you can always come back with some burnt umber lines and break up those tips so they're not so thick. And you could pull burnt umber lines down from the nose area also. So you can always kind of go back and forth with the different colors. Okay, then for in the beard area, if you want to add some flyaways into the beard, in fact, let's zoom out just a little bit. I don't need to do a whole lot, but just a few do seem to help. So don't worry about even staying right inside the lines from what you already have. These are like flyaways, and I just want to make sure I do at least 3 lines next to each other so they can kind of curve different directions than what they're on top of, and they actually show up a little better then. Just don't want one lonely one all by itself. Thinning the paint, half water. But I think it does help create a little bit more interest. And let's get a few more tucked up in that area by the lip. Sometimes it's hard to know when to quit. I love playing with the beards. You can always sit on it for a little bit and come back the next day and take another look and add a little bit more. And I don't always know if I want any more until after I get the whole piece done, and then I take one more look at everything and kind of adjust anything that I need to have done. Now you might have also noticed that I did go ahead and I got my black base coated back in for the glasses so that they'll be ready to go when I'm ready to do that. Now I've got one little spot here where I got pretty thick with that outline right next to the glass. So I'm just going to take a little bit of black and I'm going to cut that in half, and I might, yeah, it's kind of wet. I might have to wait till that dries a little bit, but I can cut that down so it's not quite so thick. That's a little better.